is all on the course here for those of you getting used to and acquainted with the course here. And I do expect you to try out and complete the homework assignment before you come to class. And that's how the deadlines are set up. And so if you're just joining, you can go back and complete homework number 1. But we did go over homework number 1's answers last time. I'm not going to go over them again here. And so now we're going to go over homework number 2 together. I'm going to do that thing we did before, which is an item analysis, and just see whether or not the questions look fair on this end. So slightly harder, I guess, than last time, but maybe we'll look into this. Last time we had like over 90% of you getting the questions right. So this would be a little bit different here, a little less than 90%. Be nice if we all got A's, right? So might as well see if we can get you to get to the A land. And so we'll look at each one of those problems here. Let me shift over homework. I'm assuming, of course, you can see the Excel spreadsheet. I'm just not talking to myself. If not, go ahead and put it in the chat. If yes, you don't have to say anything. We'll just keep cruising. All right, so this first problem, and it's all, like I said before, it's all about interpreting the words and trying to determine, are we given one thing? What are we given, and what are we trying to find? Because all these problems right now are very simple, either one or two things given and one thing you're trying to find. That's not too much complicated than that. So here we have a talk about a trucking company wants to reduce its claims by 100,000 over the next 2 years. So in other words, each of the next 2 years, they'll get $200,000 less, or they'll have to spend $200,000 less. And then in that 2 years, they expect the interest rate to be about 12% a year if that's the interest rate they're using. So the A value here is 100,000 a year. N is 2 years, interest rate is 12. So we're trying to find the present value of these two future regular payments, annual payments. And because there are two of them or more multiples of these payments, and they're the exact same value, then we're going to count that as an A. So we have to find P given the A. That's how we would write it, PA. So the factor that I computed from the formula out of the book is 1.69, and then you multiply that by 100,000, you get 169,000. Okay. Super clear, huh? Let's see. And in this case, I think I had plus or minus 10 because I did it using Excel. Let me change that here. I did the equation using Excel itself, and this is using the PV function. And using the PV function, this time F, the future value, we're not concerned about the future value, we're worried about the present value, and we're worried about the present value of A. So for the inputs that are here in this function, A is 100,000, F I put in as 0. And you can see that here in the formula. Actually, I don't even have to type in that F is 0. I mean, I could if I wanted to, but it's already optional for this function. So it's the same value there. And since it's $5 off, and I said round your answer to the nearest whole dollar, then the range that I provided should be sufficient. But let me know if you got a dramatically different number than that, okay? And let me go back to the homework here really quick. I'm going to show you, so just for those that just added the class, I'm going to quickly show you that here in Module 2, there are these factor tables that we use. And these factor tables actually come, I'm pretty sure, out of the Fundamentals of Engineering exam booklet. And so the formula that I used for this equation was this one for this problem. And then if you wanted to look up the factor here, here's the interest rate at 12%. Here's 2 years. there's find P given A, and that's 1.6901 right there. So you could have just as easily used this table to find your answer as well. All right. So we'll move on to the next one, unless there are other questions that you want to interrupt. I don't know if I set it up to where you can unmute yourselves. Yes. So if you need to unmute yourself and talk, you can, or you can post your questions in the chat while we go. All right, next problem, same thing, but now we're doing find F given A. So we got an investment and we're going to put $12,000 into it each year for 30 years. And this investment, we expect to get about 10% a year. That's what we would hope on this investment. So we got an interest rate of 10%, N equals 30, A equals 12. And in this case, we want to find the future value of this investment given the annual payments that we're getting. All right. So the factor I get is 164.4940. And then I multiply that factor by 12 and I get this answer. Now, setting this up in Excel, I use the future value function here. And in the future value function, oh, I have this letter wrong. This should be P. In the future value function, we don't care about P because it's not a single payment we're looking at. We're looking at a recurring set of payments. And that, it's in this case, it was identical, the answer. So I don't know if I put a plus or minus on here. Maybe I just put a small one. I put in there plus or minus $5. Should have captured it, but not sure if that caught your answers or not. The screen is blurry. The screen might be blurry because my internet connection isn't great. Is this coming in clear enough for you to see, though? To see how the solutions are and stuff? Hopefully it is, and if not, I can zoom in a little bit more so it's a little bit bigger so that the blurriness doesn't matter as much. You put in 198,000. All right, I want to see that. So putting in 198,000 would be, well, I'm curious how you got to round to that since it'd be more of 197,000. So maybe you calculated it and the number came out to where it made sense to round 198,000. So we can think about that, like what is it that you did there? And why you ended up with 198, because it probably should have been 197. So the next thing, I can see some other questions there. You want to see the correct answers on Blackboard. All right, so that was the investment. Here's the answer on Blackboard, 197,197,3,928, which is the same answer as here. And I got a couple of messages saying, I think I got them all right, but then it says I only got 4 out of 6 points. So,
Professor, I'm guessing it's the number 3 one, because first, like, you didn't include the interest rate, right. So we had to use the textbook to look at the full answer. And for number 10, the last question, number 3, I got 13,736,264 instead of that, unless it's in the range. You put that in the range.
Well, we can look at that one too, which is, again, sort of the same setup. You got the annuity, right? Expect a profit of 50 million, 3 years. So I guess just to make sure we're all okay with this one, we want to find the payment that could equate up to 50 million at 3 years. So the future value of a payment. So we're going to use the payment function this time. Of course, in the the factor in this time is finding, if you have the a given f, find a given f, then the factor you'll get is 0.2747. And then you multiply that factor by 50 million and you get 13 million.
Correct.
And then the Excel version was that difference. So then I plugged this difference into the problem to get you what would be the uncertainty of it. So I put in a $1,250 difference there to capture that difference. So that's where that uncertainty came in. So it should have captured that, but what did you get again?
13,736,264.
Yeah. So this should have captured. That should have got you should have got the right answer then.
Oh, because I too got 4 out of 6, and I got all the answers correct. I mean, yeah, based on what we went over right now.
Okay. Well, let me look at this slightly differently while you enjoy staring at a random other screen. I'm going to try and look at your grades and see why that might be the case.
Professor?
Yes.
Do you mind putting up the Excel sheet again with the problems worked out? Thank you.
I'll zoom out a little bit so you can see them all together again.
Thank you.
So yeah, I apologize for the confusion on problem number 3. I didn't realize I didn't grab all of it. So I'm looking at the wrong answers on problem number 3, and it seems like if it was wrong, it was way wrong. 1,735,000. Oh. One of the students, Tyler, you just added a 0 into the to the output. So you emailed me before saying, why did I get that wrong? You put in 13 million and or 130 million. I think that's what I'm seeing here. No, actually, should have worked. 13,735,000. That's interesting. I don't know why it gave you the wrong answer. Seeing here, an Angel, you just put in 13.73, which is in the right general vicinity, of course, just off by several factors of things. But that is interesting. Why is it 13,735,000 should be the right answer, but for some reason it wasn't capturing that right answer on a couple of your scores. I'm going through and correcting them right now, so giving you the credit for it. But it is interesting. I wonder if it's because it didn't have the commas in there. It looks like if you put the comma in there, well, no, somebody else had it and didn't have any commas at all. Strange. It might have interpreted your 13,735,000 for those who got it wrong as text somehow. So if you put a space in there, maybe it might have thought of it was text versus it just being straight number. So if you copied and pasted your answer in, It's interesting that some people got it wrong, but then this one student typed in this answer. See how it's got a comma here at the very end? And the software still counted that as correct. But then some people who didn't have a comma in there at all got it wrong. I thought that's interesting. Well, I'll keep my eye out for stuff like that. It's very easy for me to correct that on the back end. So if you feel like things didn't happen right, that's why I like going over these problems with you all together. Is like you might get there and say, hey, I feel like I got better scores than that. Can you explain to me why I'm not getting the answers right? So I can usually fix that on the back end here and just make sure you get the points that you deserve for your work. So this is 169,005. Yeah. So I'm looking back at the other problems and I see somebody that put in 1.69 million on accident, added in too many zeros, just kind of had a typo in there. So you did it right, you just had a typo. So if I notice that, that's no big deal. I can go back and fix that. And after we go over it, you can bring that to my attention. But I'll try to do this now when I'm here working with you, so that I don't have to go back. I can just take care of it all right now. So now I'm checking this one really quick. And seeing what everybody else put here. I noticed on this one, there's a couple people who did the 1.98 million answer and rounded it to 1,980,000. And I'm curious as to why.
What was the uncertainty that you gave for the last one?
The range on this one is the difference between these two numbers, $1,264. So anywhere in between here, you got it right. And so far, I went back through and gave everybody credit for it if they got in there with the numbers. If you were way off from that, I did not give you credit for it. You can have time to make that up later with other tasks that you'll be doing.
Professor?
Yeah.
So for number 10, I was confused on what the MARR meant in the application to solve the problem. So that just means it's the interest rate?
Yeah. Did you go look up the term MARR?
Yeah, it was something acceptable rate. I don't recall off the top of my head, but let me pull up the textbook.
Oh, we can bring it up here, but yeah, I guess you could bring up the textbook. Minimum acceptable rate of return.
Okay.
Does that
makes...
Yeah, I was gonna say, does that term make sense to you?
Yeah, it kind of does now that in the context of using it as an interest rate. Okay.
So, like, we kind of started talking about this last time, but we didn't really get into it. But when we were talking about how do we make these problems more complex, well, something like an interest rate is really just made up. You know, you go to a bank and you ask them for a loan. They set the interest rate. Now, to some degree, they set it at a level that's related to how much they're paying for their money when they borrow it from a bigger bank. Because most local banks actually do not keep money. They just trade money. And if you ever get a chance, if you have a little nerdy fascination about this stuff, there's most universities have a class called Money and Banking. Talks about how our banking system works. It's very worth your time, I think. But most banks are buying money from somebody else, and then they're adding on a little markup. So right now, I can't remember what the federal interest rate is. I don't know if you guys know really quick. Federal funds rate. 0.25%. Do you guys know what this means?
That's tiny.
It
You're getting
is
very little
small.
back.
It is very small. Yeah. So this means any large investment banks, they borrow money from the Fed and they pay 0.25% interest rate on that. It's really small. It's our interest rates have been so small ever since the recession. I think 0.25%, you really can't go below that. Like the bank, it just can't go lower than that. They can't make it zero. So they just basically say, go out and borrow money from us, and we'll give you a great deal on it. So the big federal banks or the big national banks that do investment, they'll borrow tons of money from the Fed, and then sell it to the Banks of America, or maybe Bank of America is buying it from the Fed from this rate, and then they'll sell it to their local chapters or their local branches, and you can go buy a car with this. And so they'll add on their markup, which has their overhead plugged into that. So for a bank to take this money and then buy it from the Fed and then send it to you, they add on what is their profit. So that becomes their rate of return on it. And so I think the current 30-year mortgage rate, so we can see a difference here. What is some current mortgage rates today? Oh, now we have to go into websites. Why can't they just tell us these things? But they are, oh no, I don't want to go through this. They just got to tell us. Come on, guys, just tell us. So here we go, 3.099. It's a VA rate, 2.621, 3.1. So if you went out and bought a house, you'd be paying on the top end maybe 3.25% on your loan, and that bank bought that loan from the Fed at 0.25%. So all of that in between is profit for the bank, and that's what they have to run on. And they set that themselves. Like banks try to be competitive with each other, and so they'll set different interest rates. That's why you'll see a range. So the minimum acceptable rate of return is actually just another name for interest rate, but viewed from the business perspective. So interest rate we look at as the consumer perspective. We're like, okay, I'm a consumer. I want to buy something, and I want to buy it on loan. And how much money am I going to pay, or how much is the interest rate? That's what consumers think about. But as a business, and we're thinking about investing it into something else, they'll say, all right, what is the minimum acceptable rate of return that I'm willing to take if I give this money away, if I give this money to somebody else? And inside that rate of return is my overhead plus my risk of losing the money. What is that number? So it just all gets made up. So everything really is an interest rate, but we use different terms for them depending on the perspective that we've got when we're using them. So hopefully that was helpful.
Yeah, thank you, Professor.
But I'm sure you're not the only one who has that question. I'm sure lots of people got stuck on that, and especially since I didn't have the text here. So I apologize about that, and I need to still fix that on my spreadsheet. Yeah, sorry, I just copied and pasted really quickly out of the book, and didn't realize that I didn't grab the 20% per year out of the book when I copied and pasted it. So,
Professor, I had a question. For the second question, I know why I got 1,980,000. It's because I did the rounding a little too early. So I put 16.5 when it should have been like 16.4 or something. I just did the math and I got the right answer. So if anybody else got that, it's probably because we rounded too early before we did the computation.
You rounded this factor here?
So the formula that I used, I did some math, and then so the number I multiplied it with, it was 16.5, but I did it again with my calculator, and it was supposed to be so it should be 16.4494, but I rounded that up to 16.5, and that's what gave me the 1,980,000.
You mean 164.4?
Yeah, that.
Yeah.
doing it differently.
Yeah. Yeah, that's why in the and there'll be stuff that happens like that, and in practice, what's the difference between 1,980,000, 1,973,000? Not much. In reality, I mean, it means a lot to us in a consumer. Like, I wish I had that rounding error in my pocket, right? So, but in a business sense, it might not matter. But that's why I said in the discussion boards when somebody asked about that, which is just leave that number out to the 10,000th place, the one each of your factors out to the 10,000th place, and then work it through, and then round your answer to what I tell you to. And that way, at least for grading, it comes out easily for us.
Would I be going to jail for fraud here?
No, you wouldn't. It's not that easy to go to jail for fraud. You actually have to be intentionally a jerk and evil. So no, that would have been just like your boss would have been actually no one probably would have cared. That's, like I said, a rounding error. I mean, when you talk about the big numbers that a lot of people deal with, if it's off by a few thousand, it's not a big deal. And that would have been off by like 7,000, 6,000. That wouldn't even registered on some people's bank statements if this is their business, how much cash flow they've got. No, you'd be going to jail for fraud if you took that rounding error and then took the gap in there and just kind of hid the gap in your back pocket somehow. That would be criminal, my guess. So try not to do that.
I just won't round anymore. So.
So yeah, other questions about the homework?
Yeah, Professor. So module 2 is due on Tuesday, right? So I was wondering how kind of like the setup for that is, since like this week it was module 1, but in module 1 there's nothing about chapter 2. However, we have to get into chapter 2. So I don't know if like you recommend just like scanning through the chapters and like just going through the videos.
Well, I put module 2. I put the homework number 1.3 is due on Tuesday. So that's what you've got left to do is these 3 problems due Tuesday. If anything else is due, that's a mistake. It shouldn't be. So we'll check the course calendar here.
Yeah, we have module 2 and homework 2 due on Tuesday.
This is the discussion. And then this will change. I'm going to change this to, I'll change this to another day. I got to change that because I'm going to break up these problems into more problems. So if you want to work ahead and start working on these, I believe somebody asked the question in the discussion board, if I want to work, are you going to change these problems? I'm not going to change the problems. I'm just going to break them up into smaller pieces.
Yeah, because that's chapter 3, so I just want to know.
Yeah.
Module 2, are we supposed to be reading chapter 3? Or how does it work? Thank you.
Yeah. So yeah, coming up, the deadline that's showing module 2 is the module 2 discussion. That's the one about the Amsterdam infrastructure, and I've been seeing the posts come in, which has been really great, by the way. It's been kind of interesting to see how your points of view you're sharing there. So that's just ongoing right now, and you can post stuff in there and share your research thoughts or build upon the posts that are already there. A lot of people have already kind of given some good background about Amsterdam and why this is a problem. And then I don't think too many have actually started getting into how should they be managing their risk. So there's still opportunity to contribute something new there. So. Other questions about the homework? So I have been reading these as well, and I'm interested to see how you do this. I noticed that a lot of them, I noticed that when we do the calculations, a lot of people are, just roughing in the calculations, which is fine. And looking at, median income and overtime, what is the value of the degree? Did any of you actually just go look up what is the rate of return on your degree?
I think there was a document that was in the same module, Professor.
There's a document in the module that said,
Yeah, that broke it down a little bit. But no, I did not.
document in the module. I don't even think I noticed that. Was it one of these ones? Financial value? No. Yeah, I mean, they gave this example, talked about how that's not really the way to do it. 65,000 a year times 40 years equals that number. That's not going to get you to the answer. Yeah, there's actually a number of websites that evaluate colleges based upon their rate of return. And that's usually on these like best value colleges and things. And so they do actually compute what are the schools that provide you the highest rate of return. Now they have different ways of calculating this. So to get a really good idea of this, you really need to look at what is, you need to go out and compare with others, all right? But I don't know if you guys know Harvey Mudd College. It's just down the street here. It's just over here from Cal Poly Pomona in Claremont. And after 20 years, the 4-year cost is $272,000. The rate of return on investment is about $1.14 million, and then students come out of there with about $25,000 in loans. So they compare all of these, and then then you can see what is it that you end up earning. Clearly, some of the best out of this, right, is the academies. Over 20 years, you can end up making quite a bit of money, and then you don't even have to pay anything for it, right? It's all free. It's all paid for by the federal government, so you get all that. You don't have to worry about debt coming out versus some of these other schools like Harvey Mudd maybe be a pretty expensive bill. So yeah, kind of cheating to put the military academies in there. That's not fair. Because you can make a lot of money as an Army officer if you go up high enough, and usually the academies put you into those positions. So, yeah, there's a number of websites that do this. It'll tell you what is the rate of return on your college investment. You can just go find them too as well.
Oh, then I wonder what Cal Poly Pomona is.
Yeah. And I was looking through there, and I think I found San Luis Obispo's, but I don't think I found ours. I think we're just there, but there is another one, yeah. Best return on investment. Yeah, here's Cal Poly San Luis Obispo. I honestly don't see how we'd be too far off from this. But they have a 30-year return on investment of 1.15 million. They have other Cal States here. Somehow San Jose State is more expensive than San Luis Obispo. It's interesting. And then their return on investment, 983,000. So I'm curious, in terms of engineering programs, I would think that Cal Poly students graduate with similar jobs as from both Cal Polys, and here's Cal State Chico is on this list and we're not. And it's at 798,000. I would think that we're closer to San Luis Obispo, to be honest with you, in terms of especially engineering students. So yeah, why calculate the answer when somebody else does it for you?
Professor,
Yes.
the rate of return, is it the salary you make, or what? The school's rate of return?
Well, return on investment does have a very specific definition. So I shouldn't say rate of return there, because the rate of return is basically an interest rate. But the return on investment is a separate thing that I just don't want to misdefine it. So this is efficiency of an investment compared to the efficiency of a number of different other investments. So I think the return on investment does, talk about the cost of the investment versus the minimum acceptable rate of return is just an interest rate. But the return on investment is what you get at the end minus what you spent on it, divided by the cost of it. So it includes the cost of the education inside there, I guess, is what they're saying on these.
Okay. Thank you.
By the way, this website, Investopedia, has quite a bit of good information on it in terms of glossary of terms. You're like, what does all this stuff mean and where does it come from? I find that that's the biggest hurdle to understanding all this topic, is because it's just got a whole different set of vocabulary is all. Other questions about the homework? No?
Professor?
Yes.
So how do you distinguish like which numbers are assigned to which terms? Like how do you distinguish what this number, like if how you are able to assign this number to F or this number to P or this number to A?
So that's something that takes a little bit of learning, in terms of how do I interpret these things. I briefly mentioned before that sometimes we can get confused as to whether or not we're looking for the future value of something or the past value. In which case we got to break down the meaning of the sentence really well. Was there one that really was hard for you to interpret that you're curious about discussing?
Yeah, can we go over number 9, I guess? Just because, actually all of them I got wrong, but all of them, or I think I just used a different equation. But yeah, number 9.
So yeah, read it for me and what you felt like it was telling you at the very beginning.
Sure. So determine the size of your investment account 30 years from now. So obviously N is equal to 30, and then if you deposit 12,000 a year, that's going to be, or sorry, A is going to be 12,000. And the period is going to be a year, and the account earns interest. So the interest is going to be 10% a year. I guess what you're looking for, the only other variable that's available is either P or F, and P is going to be your present value and F is your future value of the investment. So it's going to be F. I mean, yeah, you're going to be looking for F.
So did that make sense to you the first time when you were reading through it, or is that what you're saying, is that you weren't sure if it was a P or an F, basically?
I think what hung me up was just determining the equation, I guess. I used F equals P parenthesis 1 plus I to the n power, but I don't know why. Yeah, I guess, so for one, that's obviously wrong because P should be A, but yeah, I think I was trying to look through the book and through the slides how they came up with the factor number when it was obviously just used the factor tables. So I was just confused with that.
So, and then I can see Ryan said, wouldn't N equals 29 years? And in this case, no, because we're going to be putting it's basically inferring that we're going to put in $12,000 each year for 30 years. So we're going to put in 30 of these $12,000 payments. If it had said starting, because you always start at time 0 and say, well, this year I'm going to put in $12,000 and then I'm going to do the same thing for the next 30 years. If you said, I'm going to start investing next year, and then pick up we'll see what happens in 30 years, then it would be 29. So it does depend on how you word it. Now, we're not going to get that tricky right now, Ryan, to where we would have you say, oh no, you should have known it was 29 years, not 30. It will get there, I suppose, at some point. That's why having like a little cash flow diagram like this makes somewhat sense, is that it kind of helps you visualize how the payments are happening.
Could I ask you a question, Professor?
Yes.
So going back to, I think, Ryan's 29 years and what you were just saying right now. So it says that you are looking at your investment 30 years from now, but then you're going to start investing only a year from now. So that does lose a year.
Huh.
Right?
That is interesting.
Yeah, then you get like $200,000 less.
Oh, so if I put in 29, how many of you made that choice, I wonder? Let me see here. 178,000.
Don't the question say 30 years from now?
It does, but then it says you're not going to start investing until 1 year from now. I didn't notice that myself, to be honest with you.
What's the minus 190 version? Maybe that's one.
I'm seeing some of you did that. I see the 178,000 number pop up here on the question. I'm going to give you credit for that because I can see the confusion there. So you did the mechanics of the problem right. It was just slightly confusing as to whether or not it should be 29 or 30, but you solved it right. You used you found the right factor and all that stuff. So yeah, I just went through anybody who got 178, whoever got this number, I just gave you credit for the problem. So you should be good to go. So yeah, another good reason why having these built in Excel is better than having done by hand. Because you're like, oh, whoops, made a mistake. I'll fix that quick. Instead of having to redo the whole thing by hand.
So using the 29 years was correct versus the 30 years?
I can see why 29 years was probably the right answer. I can also see why we all did it. I mean, I did it using 30. I got fooled.
Yeah, I used 30.
So everybody who put 30 into that, you still got it right. And if that's the case, I'll make those changes like that on the results of all our homework and stuff as we go along. If I see that there's a reasonable reason why you got confused, it'll still get you credit if you went through the mechanics and the process correctly, if you just messed up on one of the inputs. Because you understand the process, then you can make the change really easily. I mean, fundamentally, what's the difference between 29 and 30 years? Nothing, doesn't matter. You just change that number, you go, oh, okay, well, if it was 30 years, then it'd be this. Great, done. What you don't want to have is do this kind of calculation and your boss says, so did you put in 29 or 30 years? And you go, I don't know. That's a bad answer. But if you know why you put it in, you say, well, I put in 30 because it sounded like it said 30 years here. And then your boss is like, no, you're going to start next year. It should be 29. So just change that and tell me what the number is. Easy fix. The other thing might be is like, well, are you trying to find the future value or the present value? That's the other fundamental thing that was, I think, at the core of Jocelyn's question at first, which is trying to figure out is, am I looking at the future value of this thing or I'm looking at the present value? And you can see in here they use the words from now a couple times in there as being in the future, So we're going to look at the size of your investment 30 years from now, okay? In other words, if you wanted that much money, you could look at it the other way back and say, what is all of this money worth in today's present value. So that you can just change. I think it should just be able to do that. So if you wanted to have the same result 30 years from now, you could take all that money and invest in $112,000 today, one time, and over the course of 29 years, at 10% interest rate, it's going to equal $1.783 million. So that's how that can compare, I guess you could say, if you were looking at the present value. But the question was, what is the size of your investment 30 years from now? So that's this other number. I hope I didn't confuse you by doing that comparison.
Sort of, but it's okay.
Sort of.
I think I'll still
Professor?
Yes?
Does it have to do with investing the beginning of each period or the end? Like in the Excel file, the P. In the Excel when you're trying to do FV, and you have to put all those variables, and at the end there's like beginning of period or end of the period.
You mean with this function here?
Yeah.
Well, it sounds like you're asking, does it matter if you do the $12,000 at the beginning of or end of the period? That's that 1 year?
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. If your interest rate is compounded once per year, and usually banks or your other financial institutions will tell you on what day of the year your investment is compounded. So long as you have that money in before that day, that moment where they compound it, then you get the benefit of the interest rate being compounded. So it doesn't matter if it's the beginning or the end. If it's there when the compounding happens, it's good. Does that answer your question?
Sort of. It makes sense.
But I didn't know if that was the exact question there, but
I can't see how it relates to the Excel function.
well, Excel doesn't care about the timing other than there are 30 of these payments and the interest rate is 10%. It automatically assumes that there is no more tricky timing to this. It's just that there's 30 payments, 10%, and your payment is $12,000. So Excel doesn't care about the timing at all. So it's only real life that cares about that kind of timing. That's, I guess I was bringing it up, making it more confusing than it needed to be. That doesn't help either, probably. It does take a little bit of time staring at the wall to make sure you got this right. So if you're sitting there thinking and pondering about what you're trying to do, that's a good thing. It's going to take a bit to kind of have it digest into you as to like, is this a present value I'm worried about, or is this a future value? Is this a payment, or is this, what is this? You know, and understanding really fundamentally what those terms mean. Somebody posted there, could we provide extra problems so you can get used to practicing, get used to the wording just for practice, not homework? I mean, the book certainly has lots more problems. I think I have the solution, so if you wanted to do them, maybe I could create like a practice quiz to help you go over those and see if I can go find the solutions to all the rest of them and make sure that they're programmed in there right. Yeah. And there, yeah, the self-quiz, that's right, Valeria, thank you very much. The self-quiz with other problems and answers there. All right, so we good with homework? Oh, we almost spent all our time talking about homework and not about how to make Amsterdam great again. I'm kind of bummed. So we did talk. I did see some of the discussion points come in about that, which was good. So what is Amsterdam's problem? What is one of the big problems of Amsterdam?
Isn't it sinking?
It's sinking. Why is it sinking?
I think they're extracting water from underneath, at least from the way I understood it.
Yeah. Do you guys know of other sinking places?
Here in my country, is on the capital. It's the foundation isn't strong, and so that's why they don't build tall buildings.
Why isn't the foundation strong? I mean, in all these places like Venice, New Orleans, Amsterdam, what's the issue?
They're built on top of a water table.
They're using.
Well, they were built back so far long ago that they were using stuff like clay and peat, I said.
And the wood piles.
They're using wood for foundation.
The wood is uneven, so it's skewed a little bit. That's causing an imbalance.
And then they also haven't been adding improvements over the years. So now that they're looking at it now, as it's finally starting to sink, it's kind of a little too late to try and fix everything at once.
Also, the location of itself. I mean, they chose to live near such a close proximity to water that you're bound to have all these problems.
If you look at a map of Europe, there's a number of rivers that run through this area. We have, I believe, the Rhine. Yeah. You have the Elbe. Does the Elbe come through here? No, the Elbe comes through over here. But this area here, the Netherlands, is basically a river bottom. All of the sediment that comes out of the Alps and all of these mountains down here drains into rivers and then plows out through the Netherlands. And it's all just sediment that's been deposited over the years. The Netherlands probably didn't even exist. Like this area here probably didn't even exist. It's probably like the newest part of this continent. And it's all just very loosely compacted sediment that's just there from rivers dumping it. That's why New Orleans sinks. That's why Venice sinks. Is because these places were just places that the river had just been dumping water or dumping sediment into, and it's all very loose. It's all not very stable. So you do have to go down quite a bit to get some solid land. And so that's all of this. All of this area here, these areas here are at sea level, or even some of them are below sea level. And a lot of them are below river level. So all of these rivers that are here, some of these rivers are actually higher elevation than the land surrounding them, where they're growing all those lovely tulips and making waffles. Actually, that's Belgium, sorry. So those places are in a tight place, right? Because they got a lot of water always coming through. The land's really poor. And yeah, it's going to sink. It's going to sink no matter what, unless they build the entire city on really fantastic piles. And then you get, a lot of you correctly identified that the wooden piles themselves are starting to fail. And that's usually not a big deal. Wood actually can do really well so long as it's completely submerged. It's always underwater. It's when you start drying out the wood and wetting it again and drying it and wetting again, and the water table's going up and down, that destroys the wood. So if it had just stayed dry the whole time or stayed wet the whole time, the wood would last hundreds of years. It's fine. But yeah, they have been pumping some water out. They use that for irrigation. They have a ton of infrastructure on there that tries to prevent the flooding from any sort of, windy sea days. Last night, a hurricane hit the Gulf Coast. I haven't actually heard any news about it yet to see what sort of damage was done. But when you have tremendous winds, that blows in the ocean and increases the height of the ocean in your area. And so that can cause flooding as well there. So they got all sorts of challenges there. The Netherlands is really a complex place when it comes to water resource management. They also have one of the best universities there in the world for water resource management. It's called Delft. It's in the town of Delft. So if you wanted to go get a master's degree in water resource engineering, and you wanted to get it from the best school, it's probably one of the best in the world. And they do it in English, by the way. The graduate schools in Europe are almost all in English. So you don't have to worry about learning Dutch. Okay, don't worry about that. So yeah, that's the problem. So they got all this infrastructure. It's slowly sinking. It's always going to be sinking. There's no stopping that. And then they've got this problem, right? So then who pays for it? Who does, Pedro?
The government. We hope.
Well, all right. Directly, the government's going to pay for it. Indirectly, where is the government going to get their money from?
The people.
Taxes. So we get taxes. Where are those taxes going to come from? Who's going to get taxed? Why?
All of Europe, or
Tourism.
Property tax on Amsterdam.
Germany.
Property owners.
Germany, all of Europe. Did I hear somebody say tourists?
Yeah, tourism.
Tourists can pay. How do tourists pay taxes in a place like this?
When they visit place and buy stuff and buy things, and they are taxed on it.
Sales tax, but wouldn't a sales tax also penalize the residents of Amsterdam? I mean, they're there buying stuff too. It's not like you can distinguish like, hey, are you from here? Okay, if you're not, you're gonna pay an extra 50 cents. But if you are, actually, I did see this one sign. It was really funny. It had on the sign it said Hugo, $2, and it said juice, $5. And if you get the joke, it's if you don't understand Spanish, it costs you $3 more to get a glass of juice in this place. But if you did understand Spanish, oh yeah, I want a vaso de jugo, you get it for cheaper, you know. Yeah, we can set it up like that, you know, like all the signs in Dutch say exactly what the real Dutch price is, but you're like, I'd like to buy a hamburger. And you're like, great, that'll be $5. And everybody else is like, Berkey or the Bardic? Yeah, and you're like, $2. Yeah. You know, that's how Dutch sounds, by the way. Just kidding. No, how would we? Yeah, if we could charge, people charge for weed there. Yeah, that people go there to smoke weed, so they get tagged. They might very well off of that. I actually don't know if they use their marijuana sales tax on in Amsterdam. You know, there is a way in which you can get tourists to pay stuff that when they're doing touristy things, which is you can put a tax on hotels. And you can specifically put that on the hotel rooms that are for sale and in that area. It's something that Las Vegas has done for years and years and years. Like all the hotels in Las Vegas, especially in the Strip corridor. Because there's a separate set of infrastructure that has to be maintained in that part of Las Vegas that then funds things that are related to, you know, advertising Vegas to places. So when tourists go to Vegas, that's how we make the tourist charge. We charge the tourists is by putting a tax on their hotel rooms. We could also put a tax on rental car fees at airports, right? We could also put a tax on the airport itself. When you're flying into certain airports that are big touristy destinations, you'll often see a fee on the airport itself on your plane ticket. That's pegged into those fees there. That's why discount airlines usually do not fly into famous airports because there's no taxes. There's no additional taxes and fees at these out of the way airports like Ontario versus LAX. Or I don't know. There's all sorts of examples. I flew into Europe one time, and I flew out to this place called Hahn, and it said it was in Frankfurt, but it was like an hour and a half west of Frankfurt. Still, it was like super cheap. I got a $15 flight to go from England to Germany.
Wow.
And I think it was $15. No, it was $40 to get there and $15 to get back for a flight from England to Germany, because I was flying into this no place, there's nowhere. So that's where we usually, the resort fee is that we're talking about, Ennio, is what gets charged to when you're a tourist, and you get charged that onto your hotel fee. And then at least in Vegas, I know that fee goes to the Las Vegas Visitors and Convention Authority, which then divvies up the money to different casinos for marketing campaigns, to bringing people to Las Vegas, to cleaning up the streets and that kind of stuff, and help supporting that effort. So you could do that here. I don't know if they are or not. I'm curious if you find that in your research over the next few days. If those of you are looking for something to post on, you might be able to find that. Do tourists get charged a resort fee in Amsterdam? If so, where, how? Do they car rental fees? Bike fees, like a lot of the bikes. They're a big biking place, so maybe they do that. Charge for bike rentals? I don't know. I'd be curious to find out if anybody could find it. Pedro, you keep shaking your head, and you're like, nope, it's not that. It's not that.
I went to Amsterdam last summer, so I didn't see any taxes on any of the transportation things like that. But I mean, a place that I do know that tax tourists was Cancun, with in the theme parks. If you show your government ID and it's Mexican, you get charged it was still pricey for Mexicans, I would say, but if you show your American ID, it was $2,000. So
wow.
So they got their taxes from tourists in Cancun.
Yeah, different countries have different ways of doing that. I had heard that in Cuba, they actually have separate currency for visitors. So you don't even use the regular Cuban money. If you go visit Cuba, they give you guest money, and then you do all your visit off of this guest version of their currency. And I can't remember the name. There's different versions of it, but you're not supposed to be using the local currency if you're a visitor to Cuba. So it's interesting, I thought. So there's a variety of ways in which we can fund infrastructure and manage that risk. We know that certain places are going to be risky. What kind of risks do we live with here in California?
Earthquake.
Fire, earthquake.
Fire, earthquake. Those are the most common, right? And some of you might live near fire areas and might know and be really prepared for those moments where fire is an issue, and you have your safety box and your memory box all set up. Maybe even have a big iron box in your house that will survive a fire with all your family photos and things. I don't know. There's different ways of managing that risk, right? How else can we manage the risk of fire or earthquakes? What is the typical way in which we can do that?
Having the earthquake suppression. I know they have it in taller buildings. It's a mandate now, but it's almost like springs to help the building rock with the earthquake and help sway with the earthquake, so it'll be able to move instead of just be rigid. But for the smaller houses or buildings, I'm not too sure. I guess maybe a stronger door frame, maybe.
Yeah, certainly we can build equipment in, as it were, to suppress fires and things like that. Most new homes have sprinklers inside them now. That's what, yeah. But then here you have, like Pedro said, earthquake insurance. You go buy the insurance, you basically pay a payment to somebody so that if your house is ever damaged, they would replace the house and everything in it. How many people do you think own earthquake insurance? Do you guys know if your place is covered by earthquake insurance? Your apartments?
No. I think it mandates the landlords to get earthquake insurance. I think it's mandated.
Landlords have earthquake insurance to replace the building that you're sitting in, but none of your stuff is covered on the landlord's policy. So if there is an earthquake and anything goes bad, all your stuff is destroyed, you don't get anything to replace your stuff, but the building will be replaced perhaps.
Oh, okay.
Very similar with fire. If you live in a multi-family housing unit, meaning an apartment or condo or places where you're sharing walls with other people and you have an HOA, usually your HOA fees go to, or your rent goes to covering insurance, but it's really just to replace the structure. All of your stuff on the inside of the house is your responsibility, not the HOAs or not the building. So if you don't have renter's insurance, that's what renter's insurance is for, is that you pay a certain amount a month per year. It's usually a per year thing. It's not too bad. It's like $10 a month in a way, I think, usually. And they'll replace everything in your house. If something ever goes wrong with your house, they'll just come in and say, all right, what was in your house? Here's a check for so many $1,000 for you to replace that. Yeah. Oh, Pedro's posted some details on Mexico City. Mexico City was also built on a lake. They drained the lake and built the city on the lake. So it's sinking, yes. Yeah. Venice really isn't so much sinking as like kind of sliding into the ocean, just like New Orleans is just kind of sliding away. So Mexico is just kind of sinking. It's not going to slide into the ocean, just slip off the mountain and go, woo. So, yeah. Wherever we live, we have risk that we deal with. And that is one of the objectives of cities is to, and states and other government agencies, is to manage that risk for the people. We charge taxes, we pay taxes in hopes that they are managing that risk for us and thinking about it and not just wasting their money and time on things. And that's one of the things we hope government can do for us, at least, is that because we're all sitting here living together, if we're all paying taxes together, then government should be able to do things like make sure our roads aren't bumpy, make sure the water turns on when we want it to turn on, and make sure that we can recover from a natural disaster quickly. Although most of the time, recovering from natural disasters is handled by insurance, not taxes. So even governments don't typically help you out if it's like a sudden natural event. That's why I want to talk about that on Amsterdam, is that if what happened to Amsterdam is a sudden event, like they had an earthquake recently or something like that, this would be a separate issue. We treat acts of nature completely separate from just the normal wear and tear of how the earth works, right? You can't stop plate tectonics, so you're just going to keep going, right? Those things are going to happen. So depending on what is the cause at that route, then that changes how we finance that. In Amsterdam's case, it makes perfect sense to turn this into a tax and finance it through consistent public source of funding, because this is always going to be a problem. Versus if we're just worried about the absolute risk of something bad happening over time, that's where we would knock on the door of the insurance companies and say, what would you think it's worth? How much money would I give you if you could insure me against some bad thing happening, like a fire, earthquake, or flood or something? So if you really like the statistics stuff and the financing stuff merged together, there are jobs that do that. You'd certainly be qualified to take on those jobs by the time you graduate if that kind of was interesting to you. But there's a bunch of people at insurance companies. That's what they do is they compute risk, and then they find out how much that risk is worth, and then they sell people policies on that risk. I mean, you coming out with an engineering degree, I doubt you'd necessarily go straight to work for just like regular consumers looking for their homes. You probably go work and help businesses deal with different kinds of risk. But that's also a thing that construction managers do all the time. There's a couple jobs in the construction management world where your job is to look at the construction of a site and calculate the risk of something bad happening, and then negotiate an insurance policy for your specific activity to make sure thing happens right. So an example of that is when they were expanding the Panama Canal, and they finished that in about 2014, 2015, I think. They had to build these gigantic steel gates that were going to be used for the locks of the Panama Canal. As they would slide into place, water would fill up, that kind of stuff. So the gigantic steel doors, they were 60, 70 feet tall, 70 feet wide. They're gigantic. They were manufactured in Europe and had to be sailed down on some barges to Panama. So what's the chance of you encountering a nasty storm in the Atlantic Ocean? Mm-hmm. Greater than zero, for sure, right? So you can look that up in terms of weather pretty easily. And then once they got those gigantic doors delivered to Panama, they had to sit there until they were ready to be installed and carted in there. They had to sit there for a couple months. So then what's the probability of there being a crazy storm in Panama to blow these gates over and damage them? Also greater than zero as well. So then they had to find an insurance policy that said, all right, if anything happens to these things, this is going to set us back a certain amount of time. It's going to cost us money. We'll have to fabricate new steel doors like this. So that calculation happens a lot with construction in the construction world, and that's usually somebody's bigwig job. Like if you get that job, you're an important person. You're making a decent amount of money to manage that risk. So risk managers, it's not a bad career. I'll tell you that monetarily. You can get some good money out of that. Well, it's 9:45. Should let you guys go. Now that we understand Amsterdam, they're all good. They're all happy now. We're going to solve their problems for them. Next week, homework 1.3 is due on Tuesday, and then I'm going to spend some time building out the rest of the assignments. I just needed some breathing room here for the beginning of the semester. I'm living on my fingernails right now with time management, so some of you might be able to relate. So I should be able to build out the rest of the class and get it all built nice so it looks nice, and then we should be able to see easily where all your homework is and that kind of stuff. So, all right, have a good day, everybody.
Bye, Professor.
Professor, I have a question.
Sure.
Hi, so this is Maria. I emailed you yesterday about trying to add to the class.
Yes.
So I still haven't gotten the permission number from Kelly.
Are you on the wait list?
I am. So I was wondering is there a way for you to add me from the wait list?
That's the thing is that the permission numbers that I had, I couldn't add anybody. That was the weird thing. So
I tried the one you gave me. It didn't work.
Yeah. Well, the one that I gave you, did it let you onto the wait list, or you could get onto the wait list anyway?
I could get onto the wait list anyway.
Okay. So yeah, I need to figure that out. I need them to give me better permission numbers for sure. So. Yeah, but I don't have that ability. For some reason, when they generated permission numbers for my class, they didn't provide me any numbers that actually worked.
Okay. So my other question is, can I access the Blackboard while I'm not enrolled?
Yeah, And I can fix that for you right now.
Thank you.
And Maria, what's your email, Cal Poly email?
It's M as in Maria, B as in boy, O as in orange, R as in river, O as in orange, V as in Victor, S as in sky, K as in Gale, A as in apple, at CPP.
Got it. So you're now in Blackboard. You should be able to see the course and start working on the homework assignments.
All right. I'm just checking it really quick to see if I got it. Yes, perfect. Thank you so much. So I'll start working on that, and in the meantime, I'll try to get a hold of Kelly, I guess.
I'll see if I can reach out to her again. She had to leave last weekend and came back to a whole bunch of emails, so I know she's kind of buried.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. She did email me yesterday asking me if I got an email from you or if I got the permission number, and I told her that I did, and I forwarded her the email, but she hasn't responded to that yet.
Well, it might be that she might have assumed that you got that. I'll follow up, but she might have just thought, oh, you got what you needed, so she's done.
I did tell her that you gave me the permission number and it did not work. So, well, I don't know, but yes, hopefully I will hear from her soon. But it shouldn't be a problem, right? Me adding to the class?
It won't. I'll make sure you get in, and for now you're into the Blackboard class. You can start doing the homework at least, and just follow up with her.
All right. Well, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Okay.
Hello, professors.
Hi.
Yeah. I made a mistake on the homework number 1.2, so I got the 0 point on the homework. Is it possible for me to redo it? If it's not possible,